clear momentum from Donald Trump to Kamala Harris as Joe Biden's got out of the race. I'll note still no clear leader up here, but you would much rather be Kamala Harris.
Why is no one talking about amnesty? I suspect Kamala Harris will be talking about it. She briefly brought it up. So Democrats in the past used to play this weird.
The enthusiasm around the Harris-Walz campaign is seen at their rallies, no doubt. It's also showing up in new polling that we want to bring to you today, showing the Democratic ticket has made some gains in some battle.
I said this yesterday. J.D. Vance had a horrible interview with Dana Bash. Dana Bash actually cooked his ass up and down, like embarrassed him, thoroughly embarrassed him. Okay. And part in that process, and in the interviews that J.D. Vance has given since then to ABC, NBC, and CNN, the liberal media is like finally starting to ask these questions, like, how do you suggest a incredibly right-wing psychopathic policy such as mass deportation of all migrants currently living on U.S. soil, which is like around 10 to 20 million people? Okay, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing to ask. Baba, yemek yapar mısın? Yok hayır şeyde saat 3'te tavuk var.
Ground states. What does momentum look like in the polls? Harry Anton is here. What are you seeing?
What am I seeing? So these were these New York Times Siena College polls that came out over the weekend. And look, this is Democrat versus Trump margin. This is May, Biden versus Trump. You see plenty of red on this side of your screen, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, of course, that quote-unquote blue wall. This was back in May. You saw Trump up by 3, Trump up by 1 in Wisconsin, Biden up by a single point in Michigan. The trend line here is what's so important. So let's jump ahead from May to August. We go from some red on this side of the screen. Look at all this blue on this side of the screen. Pennsylvania, Harris by 4. Wisconsin, Harris by 4. Michigan, Harris by 4. So you're seeing those comments on Trump on social media kind of going bananas, and you're wondering why. It's because he's looking at polls like this, which shows clear momentum from Donald Trump to Kamala Harris as Joe Biden's got out of the race. I'll note still no clear leader up here, but you would much rather be Kamala Harris.
Why is no one talking about amnesty? I suspect Kamala Harris will be talking about it. She briefly brought it up. So Democrats in the past used to play this weird song and dance where they would do a little push-pull, okay? Democrats used to do this push-pull where they would be like, here's a really broadly popular, phenomenal idea. Let's make people who were brought, like kids who were brought into this nation by their undocumented parents when they were like literally 4, 5, all the way 12, up to the age of, I believe, 18. Let's offer them a pathway to citizenship, or let's actually create a process where they can at least like operate, maybe not with the full-blown citizenship, but like have some level of like protection. Okay. This originally was something that the Republicans were completely against. This is called Dreamers, okay? Deferred action on childhood arrivals. This was an idea that Republicans were against. Democrats made it happen under the Obama administration. However, by the way, Dreamers still do not have full-blown citizenship, and the idea, like, or the policy of giving Dreamers full-blown citizenship, okay, is polling, has always polled at 90% consistently. So that is one aspect of the immigration equation that encompasses, you know, hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people. I forget what the actual number is, but it's just like completely unacceptable that it was even contested. And to this day, it's still contested by the Republican Party. However, because it was so overwhelmingly popular that the Trump administration was not able to actually cut it off entirely and shut down the program entirely, because 90% of approval rating is something that you cannot cast aside. Now, how do we get here, though? Democrats did that, and Obama also was the deporter in chief simultaneously. More aggressive immigrant detention processes, but also Dreamers. Under the Biden administration, however, we saw something different. In 2020, when Biden was running against Donald Trump, he ran on a overtly progressive, pro-immigration platform, okay? Overtly progressive pro-immigration platform. his first 100 days in office, he said he's like, overturning all of the previous Trump border, like all of the previous Trump immigration restrictions, and will offer a pathway to citizenship to all immigrants, all the stuff. He didn't do any of it. Okay. He continued. He basically kept in place the what's the name of the legislation? It's like Remain in Mexico Act, or he basically also kept Title 42 in place. There were some hurdles. There were at times when the Remain in Mexico, he basically kept, and Title 42, he basically, Title 42 he completely kept intact. So that was pretty devastating. But it doesn't end there, okay? What he ended up doing after that was allow the Republicans to counter message on immigration for the entire 4 years of his administration, and consistently pull on the immigrants are doing crimes, they're rapists, they're nonsense, without any sort of effective counter messaging on it, by bringing people back to reality on the matter. And in that process, people became crazy over it, okay? So then the Democrats turned around and responded in the worst way possible, which was to lean into the xenophobia, to lean into the right-wing narratives. Immigration in this country for years was seen as an economic burden, okay? It was an economic policy. Now, I can argue on that front about how that was also false and that was also incorrect, but that's not what we're talking about now, because the Republicans moved from they're taking our jobs to they're raping our daughters, okay? They moved further right on immigration and successfully turned at least the conversation in American media to immigrants are an issue that needs to be dealt with as a national security problem. That was new, okay? And they were able to successfully change the narrative, and they turned it into a crime issue. It's no longer a labor issue. Now it's a crime issue, okay? Now, this is Hitlerian to begin with, okay? It's born out of nothing but right-wing hysteria and white supremacist attitudes. People that don't look like you, that's it. Because if you look at the actual data, undocumented migrants are responsible for less crime per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens are, okay? If you look at the actual data, when they try to tie the fentanyl crisis back to like brown people, that's also built on falsehoods, okay? Donald Trump runs around the entire country and keeps saying that undocumented migrants have hundreds of thousands of Americans. He says that in campaign stops left and right. He said that at the RNC. This number is insane. It is completely made up, okay? It's completely made up. The actual number, according to Customs and Border Patrol, that undocumented migrants have committed in 2024, this past fiscal year so far, is 23. 23. 023. Okay, not 23,000, 23. Okay? And that is what is so unimaginably cruel about the way that these guys have been able to just openly lie about this without any contest whatsoever. Okay? Now, Donald Trump will try to play fast and loose. Republicans do this all the time when it comes to undocumented citizens and the way to communicate with them, where he will try to package the fentanyl deaths with the migrant crisis, which is not a crisis at all. When you look at the actual data from the Department of Homeland Security, this is incredibly consistent throughout the Trump years, incredibly consistent throughout the Biden years. It's just the reality. Drugs that are coming over the border are apprehended at regular points of entry, okay? Ports and like actual border crossings inside of cars. Drugs are not shipped over the border in the ass cheeks of a migrant, okay? That's not how this works. People are not just like smuggling drugs in their fanny pack as they cross the Rio Grande Valley, as they cross the goddamn desert. That is inconsistent with reality. It doesn't even make sense when you think about it. We're talking about metric tons of fentanyl and chemical compounds necessary to cook up drugs, okay? Why would that be a consistent, reliable way to traffic drugs when those guys are getting apprehended at the border, okay? All of the drugs that are coming over the border are stopped at regular points of entry, okay? 90%. And they're not undocumented citizens that are trying to traffic these drugs over the border. they are American citizens. Okay? American citizens. 90% Lamau, mules exist, dude. I love you, chatter, but you're wrong. And I know that it sounds insane because you have been led astray because nobody talks about the actual facts. But this is the Department of Homeland Security. Less than 10% of drugs are actually caught, but go off king. Brother, think. The mules are American citizens inside of their cars with American license plates. That is the easiest way to sneak drugs across the border. What do you think is a more successful strategy? Giving random people who paid a jackal like 10 grand or some drugs to cross the border with drugs and then get apprehended by Customs and Border Patrol, or to chop up a car and put the fentanyl inside of the car? What do you think? Not a jackal, a coyote, sorry. I never said it was all migrants. No, you said 90% Lamau, and also said mules exist, dude. Yeah, mules do exist. They're just American citizens, but that goes against the narrative that you have been taught, so it doesn't matter. 90% of drugs aren't caught. Okay, brother. So do you think if 90% of drugs aren't caught, but 90% of the drugs that are caught, okay, 90% of the drugs that are caught at regular points of entry, do you think that all of the other drugs are actually secretly being trafficked over the border through undocumented immigrants? Is that what you think is going on? Or do you think it's more likely that 90% of the drugs that are not caught are still also crossing through regular points of entry? I agree with that. Okay. I mean, he's not only moving not only put the goalposts on a motor at this point, motorized goalposts up in here, but he's also coming to terms with my argument, I guess, even though he originally approached the subject matter as though he was in disagreement. I don't even know where he got the 90% of drugs are not caught, or less than 10% of drugs are caught over the border. I don't know where he got that information from, but it doesn't even matter because the ones that are caught at 90% are caught at the regular points of entry. They only find a small percentage is my point. I know, but you can't suspect, if the data is readily available, that 90% of the drugs that are apprehended are actually coming in through regular points of entry and only 10% are through like random migrant crossings or people slingshotting over the border wall, or building tunnels under the border, why would you ever make the false assertion that actually secretly these guys are all trafficking the drugs through the pockets of Guatemalan abuelas, okay? Because that's the assertion that the Republican Party is making. That's what they try to lead you to believe, okay? According to the USSC, in 2020 fiscal year, 80.1% of all drug traffickers are U.S. citizens. Of course they are. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for them not to be U.S. citizens. They are less likely to get additional scrutiny. That's the point. What the? Oh no! This overheated and started leaking. We're at the final. We got to the final stage of this. This one worked. I used this cable for years and years, and it was very reliable and it was very good. But we have officially come to the end of this cable's lifespan. I was like, why is my arm so? And why does it smell like? Why does it smell like there's something gone? Something's like cooking a little bit. It's done. We've come to the end of the lifespan of this cable. Rest in peace. R.I.P.
Up by 4 within the margin of error. Then Joe Biden down by 3 in Pennsylvania, down 1 in Wisconsin, and only up by 1 in Michigan within the margin of error. These are 3 to 5 point movements. Democratic ticket, clear momentum, and it's clearly angering Donald Trump.
But take us inside the numbers. Who is Harris appealing to that Joe Biden was not when we had these numbers?
Yeah, so, okay. Is it that Harris is getting Republican voters? No. It's not that she's getting Donald Trump voters from 2020. What is she doing? Number one, she's coalescing the Democratic base. So look, in Biden this spring, he was getting only 90% of the voters who voted for him back in 2020. Look at it now. What do we see? We see Kamala Harris is getting 93% of those voters. So we see that momentum. The other thing that we see is those untraditional voters. Those voters, there was all this talk that Donald Trump was going to get these voters off the sidelines and get them to vote for him who didn't vote in 2020. Back in the spring, look at that. Joe Biden was only getting 28% of the 2020 non-voters. Look at where Kamala Harris is now. She's getting 43% of those voters, a 15-point jump. So Kamala Harris is doing two things here. Number one, she's getting more of those untraditional voters, and number two, she's coalescing that Democratic base.
Are you seeing signs in other polling of the Harris momentum as well?
Yeah, okay, so if it's just one poll, I'm not that interested. But take a look here. This is among those certain to vote. This is the Democrat versus Trump in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. This is an Ipsos poll that came out last week. Look at this, the June margin, Biden versus Trump. We see Trump was up by 2, very similar to what we saw in those New York Times Siena College polls. Look at where we are now in this August margin. Look at that, +2 for Harris. So again, a 4-point movement. Harris, again within the margin of error. And the last thing I'll note, look at this. If Harris just wins up in the Great Lakes, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, she can lose Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, and she gets to exactly 270 electoral votes.
All right, so momentum it is today.
Momentum it is.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
CNN's Isaac Dover is here with the very latest. How does the Harris team view things this morning, Isaac?
Well, look, John, they obviously are glad to see good poll numbers following a good couple of weeks for the vice president since she got into this campaign. Remember, we're only talking about 3 weeks here since Joe Biden dropped out. But they're trying not to get too ahead of themselves. Harris herself was in San Francisco yesterday at a fundraiser, and she said to donors there that she's never been one to really believe in the polls, whether they're up or they're down. What we know is the stakes are so high, and we can take nothing for granted in this moment. And look, what the Harris campaign is focused on here is making sure that people don't get feel like the race is done, feel like they don't have to do a lot of the work here. There are very few people who believe that this race won't come down to a couple of 100,000 voters at most between a couple of states, and that's the sort of thing that could even, doesn't matter where the popular vote goes, could end up swinging the Electoral College.
It's amazing to think about Democrats talking about complacency when just 3.5 weeks ago it was Republicans talking about complacency there. So what does the week have in store in terms of a policy rollout? And I guess the first ever appearance between President Biden and Kamala Harris left the race.
Yeah, we saw them briefly on the tarmac when that prisoner exchange happened at Andrews Air Force Base, but this will be an event on Thursday in Maryland, right outside D.C., with the two of them there together. It is put out as an official government event, not as a campaign event exactly, but they clearly are going to be doing it in the sense of passing the torch. What the White House has told us so far is that it will be focused on lowering costs for Americans, and what that is important is because not only is it Harris and Biden talking about economic issues, but it's the two of them staying very closely connected to each other. And that is something that we've seen since Harris got into this race, even as the Republicans in the Trump campaign have tried to say that Biden's record is bad and Harris is tied to it in a bad way. That's not the approach that they're taking.
Isaac Dover, great to see you this morning. Always great to have you on in the morning. Appreciate it. Sarah?
All right, here we go again. False claims about crowd size from Donald Trump, but even more talk about Kamala Harris's race and childless cat from his running mate, J.D. Vance. Just a few of the new and familiar lines of attack we heard this weekend as Donald Trump tonight sits down for an interview with Elon Musk. Let's bring in CNN's Steve Contorno. Steve, some Republicans want to see a more disciplined, as you heard from Isaac Dover, message from Trump going after Harris. But is that what they're getting?
Certainly doesn't seem so far, Sarah. I think scattershot is probably the best word to describe what we saw from the former president over the weekend. He made fun of Senator John Tester's weight, the Democrat in Montana. He called Tim Walz, quote, very freakish. He said Harris Walz supporters were pink-haired Marxists, looters, perverts, flag burners, Hamas supporters, gun grabbers, and human traffickers. And he also continued to be
solid. I think it's going to be awesome when he has, like, in the words of, who was it? I'm forgetting now. In the words of that one Joe Rogan guy who was being interviewed by Joe Rogan, never mind, this bit doesn't work. He's going to have one of the most neurodivergent adults on the planet try to have a conversation with Donald Trump on a website that is notoriously finicky. It's going to be great. It's content, okay?
fixated on the crowd size of what Vice President Harris is getting versus his own. In fact, in a series of social media posts.
Who was the guy who said full-blown autism? How am I forgetting that? Oh, it was Robert F. Kennedy. Yeah, RFK, my favorite scientist, who said you never see an adult with full-blown autism.
He shared debunked footage and claims that Harris was doctoring her crowd size. These were AI images that they were sharing. He said that she should be disqualified because they faked their crowd sizes when these photos were easily debunked. Meanwhile, his running mate continues to be answering questions about some of his past statements and trying to focus the attacks more on what they say are the anti-family policies of the Harris-Walz ticket. Take a listen to what J.D. Vance told our CNN over the weekend.
I think that what it is two people, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who aren't comfortable in their own skin because they aren't comfortable with their policy positions for the American people. And so they're name calling instead of actually telling the American people how they're going to make their lives.
This is such a funny line. The Democrats are resorting to name calling because they said you're weird is my favorite bar so far. It's up there with the Democrats really need to stop with this violent rhetoric. What's the violent rhetoric? Saying Trump's policies are Hitlerian. Democrats need to stop with the violent rhetoric. They've really tuned it up a lot. Democrats really need to stop with name calling. Bro, you're running on the name call ticket. What the
It's better. I think that's weird, Dana, but look, they can call.
Like, name calling is what Trump is good at, or used to be. Not as much anymore. Now he says Kamala, and you know, that's it.
They want to.
Do you believe Kamala Harris is black?
I believe that Kamala Harris is what she says she is, but I believe importantly that President Trump is right that she's a chameleon. She pretends to be one thing in front of one.
Now, still not much campaign action from Donald Trump this week.
He still has bangers every now and then, like New Scum. That's a banger. Like, I recognize that. Real recognize real, okay? Gavin Newscum, banger. Undeniable, okay? He still got it every now and then when it matters, in moments that matter. But overall, much worse than before.
Though he will, as you said, Sarah, speak to Elon Musk later today. J.D. Vance, meanwhile, will be more active on the campaign trail in the coming days.
Steve, just curious what you can tell me about the Trump campaign saying that they have been hacked. What do we know on that front?
Yeah, there's still a lot we're still trying to figure out about this. The Trump campaign claims that a, quote, high-ranking official in the campaign was hacked from Microsoft by Iranian hackers. Now, Iran, we should say, has so far denied this and is unclear if Iran was responsible. Microsoft has so far declined to comment. The U.S. government has sort of not shared what any details that it has had at this point. This is all stemming from Politico reporting over the weekend that it had received emails including internal communications and a research dossier on J.D. Vance that the campaign had put together. The campaign in a statement saying these documents were obtained illegally from foreign sources hostile to the United States.
New poll, 55% of voters in swing states thinks that Donald Trump is weird.
This is registered voters across the U.S. And I think this also gives you an indication that the Kamala Harris campaign.
Bro, I swear to God, I'm seeing the dominoes fall, dude. I have personally never seen like the Democratic Party actually lean into some good ever. They always run so goddamn scared. Oh my God, I'm so happy. It's just, there's still so much more that the Democratic Party needs to do, especially in terms of like the ongoing, but overall, it does feel weird to see them actually do things that I've been begging for them to do for years. It feels great to have this vindication at the very least. Like, I'm not exactly pro-Democratic Party by any means, as you guys know, and actively criticize them. Some of those issues that they criticize them on is this. So, you know, it makes me feel a little happy in spite of all of the awful other awful stuff that they have not moved on at all, in spite of the reality that, like, on immigration they're doing a horrible job. The fact that the Tim Walz choice and what that spells. The fact that they're like running on the Republicans are weird. We want to feed children. They want to talk about children's. Awesome.
Is working. So this is registered voters across the 7 closest states back in the 2020 campaign: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Earn their position. Kamala Harris, 45% of voters say that she earned her position. Compare that to Donald Trump, just 42%. Donald Trump and his campaign is losing the messaging right here. How about they are weird? This is not where Donald Trump wants to be leading it, but 55% of voters in those 7 states say that Donald Trump is weird, compared to just 39% for Harris. So the Harris campaign...
Bro, that is a dagger, okay? That is a dagger. And it actually pairs well with what I was talking about because it is something that Donald Trump despises, right? Here's the Atlantic article. This is the most important part of the Atlantic article. Something else, and something quite important, has changed. The whole landscape of the campaign has been transformed. The rise of Harris instantly cast Trump in a new light. He formerly seemed more ominous and threatening, which its political drawbacks signals strength. A thing that I've been saying over and over again. That's why the weird thing is so much better than just saying he's scary and a dictator. Now he seems not just old, energy, stale, even pathetic. He has become the political version of Fat Elvis. You feel me? I told you guys, it is a perfect way. It is a perfect way to capture the attention of moderates, those who are not paying super close attention to this race, because the Democrats, I think, are correct when they say the Republicans have style policies. But obviously, consistently saying there is not hitting all of the avenues, all of the demographics that it's supposed to hit. When you call them weird, on the other hand, you basically deflate the entirety of their culture narratives that they run on. They're weird. They have this, like, they have to be bred. Women have to be bred. It's obsessive. It's gross. But most importantly, it neutralizes it. Because if they were talking about this on the if they were talking about this as as though they're scared, Republicans can run on a message of being strong, right? Ooh, the Democrats are scared of us. It's because we're strong. But when you call them weird, all of a sudden they're not strong. They're just gross. You no longer, it's like being in an argument with someone and they say that your breath stinks. That's actually awesome. I never even thought about that. That's like the nuclear option. Reducing Trump to a figure of ridicule is very similar to Mel Brooks' treatment of Hitler. Rather than give them a sense of menace and strength, Brooks reduces them to a joke too ridiculous to ever be taken seriously. Would this stuff have worked as well in 2016? No, because in 2016, Donald Trump was new. He was an unknown entity. He had the capacity to run as an anti-establishment figure, going up against a very unpopular establishment figure. But after 4 years of him being president, you can't really do that anymore. You can't be like, oh, I'm an unknown guy. I might do something crazy. You know? Anyway. Üçteki reklam olur mu amına koyayım? İyice para göz olmuşsun. Korkma, sen görmüyorsun zaten reklamları. Türkiye'desin. Size vermiyor reklam büyük ihtimalle. Box CEO Kamala Donor weighs in on Trump's AI takes, raises a good point. This should rightfully weird out the crypto AI bros who have been following tech advancements with a fine-tooth comb. Wait, what? Dude, I don't think that, just so I'm clear, this is the guy we think should be driving AI regulation policy. I'm sorry. Nobody gives a fuck what, the AI CEOs and crypto bros think, okay? There's precisely one guy, and his name is Megaphonics. Yeah. My point is they're voting, donating to, and they're uniquely positioned to call out Trump's bull. Yeah, I don't think they care about it that much, man. I'm going to be honest.
Their messaging, or the messaging against them, is not working for the Trump campaign, and the messaging from the Harris campaign is working against the Trump campaign. And I think this...
So, going along with the weird narrative, we talked about how, deflated that makes the Republicans feel. Here's some more positive notes, okay? Kamala Harris at a San Francisco fundraiser says, let's not take anything for granted. I know there's a lot of enthusiasm out there. I've never been one to really believe in the polls. What we know is the stakes are so high and we can take nothing for granted in this critical moment. Solid approach. Kamala Harris at the SF fundraiser, I just love Gen Z. I know it may be complicated if you have Gen Z in your family, but I think they're terrific. When Gen Z starts voting in the numbers, a whole lot of this is going to have an absolute sea change in terms of leadership. But yeah, not taking polls for granted is actually pretty solid. Some important lore about Kamala. When she ran in her first election for public office as DA in San Francisco, she started off at 6%. She would go on to defeat the 15-year incumbent with a 56% of the vote. Do you think along with Harris coming into the picture, do you think that the nail in the coffin is Trump picking JD as the running mate? I mean, the guy's a douche. I think it doesn't help. Is Gen Z actually more progressive? On some issues. Anyway, let's continue.
Trying to sow chaos throughout our democratic process. I should note, Sarah, that Donald Trump was the recipient of this kind of foreign interference back in 2016. He actually encouraged Russia to go after Senator Clinton's emails and then continue to talk about them well into the race.
Gen Z grew up in a world where it's not even a question that like someone can be openly gay. Okay. So on that front, they obviously are not going to be anywhere near as aggressive as like a 60-year-old person is on LGBT rights and stuff. Like, even if they're right wing on others, they are still going to be more progressive on things that they take for granted, the social norms, right? Gen Z also is obviously very, very pro-Palestine in comparison to other generations in the United States of America. Having said that, however, I am not one to believe in generational political divides. That's not how that works. There are still there's a massive gender gap in Gen Z. Like Gen Z women, girls, women, they are very progressive. Gen Z boys are still very much incredibly reactionary as well. So by and large, the idea that like this next generation will save us is the tale as old as time. Everybody loves talking about it. It's just not a real thing. Yeah, Gen Z boys are the Tate generation. Gen Z boys are the Aiden Ross generation to a certain degree. It just always like the dominoes fall, and at the end of the day, when they get to like a voter eligible age, they end up swinging in similar in a similar distribution of the vote. Did we already talk about JD Vance being a hypocrite about drag? A little bit. Bro, we all know how this goes. Dems make promises they can't keep and fundraise out the same issues at the next election because a few bad apples voted out of line. It's the same, except they've been in power for years now and done none of it. Why do we keep simping for them? I'm not simping for them. But I can only respond to what they're saying that they're going to do, especially when, at least on the messaging front, they have dramatically changed the way that they operate. I'm comparing this to 2016. In 2016, they literally would not even message appropriately. They were just like, you got to take our vote for granted. Shut the fuck up. You have to vote for us. Do I believe that they will commit to a broadly popular progressive agenda when push comes to shove and they're actually in office? I do not know. I do not feel that they will. But then again, they've never been this responsive to social pressure, public pressure before. So who knows? I can only look at what they've done and what is different than what they've done in the past and analyze off of that.
Communication strategist Frank Luntz just held a focus group. Watch this.
How many of you were supporting Joe Biden 14 days ago? Raise your hands. None of you. How many of you, if the election were held today, would vote for the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris?
I would.
Okay, that's all of you.
None of you to all of you. And Frank is with us now. Frank, thank you so much for being with us. Let me just
HasanAbi head reply guy Frank Luntz.
ask you, if the election were held today, who would win?
She would win. And I want to emphasize, it's not just about momentum. And I thought your commentary just before this was dead on. It's also about passion. It's about commitment. And Harris voters are even more eager to vote for her than Donald Trump voters are to him. We've not seen that in the entire campaign. Call that intensity. And her campaign is generating the intensity. And another key component is exactly why this is happening. She's talking and emphasizing her persona.
Hasan, I'm curious. My mom says her tax money goes to abortions and she doesn't like that. Is that true? It's not, but it should be. It's not true, but it should. Yes, her tax money does not go to abortions, even though it should go to abortions. It's a medical procedure. It's ridiculous. Oh, I'm really mad that my tax money sometimes goes to like veterans being able to get insulin. I think they should have diabetes. See how stupid that sounds when you say it like that?
Attributes or character traits. And that's where Donald Trump has been commenting. And the fact is, the American people do not want to hear the same kind of negativity, the same kind of attacks that he's been delivering. His strength is on issues. most particularly the two issues that matter most, inflation and immigration. But instead of speaking about those two issues and talking about the failures of the Biden administration, he's been making these personal attacks, and it's frankly turning the voters off that he needs to reach. Now, I want to emphasize one more thing.
Hang on, Frank. 'Cause I want to actually break down some of the things you just said there into pieces. And before we get that, though, again, if the election were held today, you say that Harris would win. If the election were held 4 weeks ago, who would win? Who would have won?
Donald Trump would have won, and I was very careful when I said it. And the reason why, threefold. Number one, he's winning those three states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Number two, he had the intensity, so he'd have done actually 1% better than his polling showed. And number three, frankly, he was on the issues that people cared about.
Let's talk about the Harris side for a second, because you talk about the excitement and enthusiasm. One of the things that she and her running mate are leaning into is this idea of joy. How does joy rate in your focus groups? Is there anything you can see where that's having an impact?
It's not joy. It's the absence of meanness. And I want to be specific about this. It's not that she's so energetic and so, which is part of it. The people in the focus groups appreciate that. It's that they've stopped appreciating the same kind of attacks again and again, year after year, that Donald Trump delivers. Frankly, and now let me upset everyone here, it's not that she's winning this campaign, it's that Donald Trump is losing the campaign. And I'm starting to wonder, how does he not see this? How does he not see the polling decline that he's had? How did he not?
No, he sees it. He absolutely sees it. That's why he's like swinging. He sees it. That's why he's swinging in the wildest directions. Delivery geldi. Hayır. If he hadn't noticed it, he wouldn't be lashing out this aggressively.
Read and understand that people were fed up with a 93-minute convention speech that was really great for the first 30
You know his ass is desperate. He started posting on Twitter again. Come on, dude.
minutes and got really awful at the end. We are different people than we were when he was first elected. We are a different country in 2024 than we were in 2016. And I don't think that he understands it. Last point, I don't think it's his campaign, because I see the stuff that they put out. I think it's actually the candidate that's responsible for this.
Look, at all the reporting over the last 3 days has seemed to indicate that the leaks, the likes of which we've seen, generally speaking, are to send the candidate a message. You've got to see this. You've got to see the problem you're in. Ezra Klein, this wasn't an article, this was a column in the New York Times today. He's an opinion writer, but he writes, quote, Biden's communication strategy was designed to make Trump bigger. Harris's strategy is to make him smaller. And then Klein continues, the result is that Trump is starved for the resource he craves.
Last try. Have you talked about the interview with Elon Musk and Trump? Are you guys insane? Do you think that like this interview, I will not actually cover the interview when it's happening in real time? What do you mean last try, bro? It's in the title. I'm gonna cover it. It's about anneme değil mi? Evet, okay.
His most attention, and as is often the case when he loses control of the headlines, he's making loonier in more self-destructive arguments. How do you feel about that?
I think I never thought I would say this, because Ezra and I have disagreed on a lot. I think he's dead on, but let's talk about the impact on democracy in the end. The key moment here is going to be the debates when Harris and Trump stand side by side and give the alternative points of view. I still think he has a reasonable chance of winning, because in the end, the issue agenda favors him, but not if you're so angry that you've stopped reflecting the people you're trying to reach.
Frank Luntz, great to speak with you this morning. Thanks so much for your time, as always.
He's cooked, bro. He's cooked. The only thing that can save him right now is Israel. Israel going into full-blown, and then Iran torching Saudi oil refineries, which puts the entire globe into a panic, which increases prices instantly. Our supply chains are super efficient. So like a minor mishap can lead to catastrophic results in prices. A major mishap like that will lead to massively consequential economic problems. With the exception of Israel, bringing the entire planet, torching the global economy by behaving like the mad lads that they are. it's pretty cooked for Trump. I'm telling you right now, they're going to pull the immigration button again. Right now, border crossings are down. Okay. They're going to try to do another like Guatemalan migrant refugee caravan is coming into the United States of America, come close to the election. Maybe one or two high profile undocumented migrant, they will post their eyes as though they are running rampant throughout the country. Okay. But ultimately, the most significant weakness, the most significant, most consequential opening for the Democratic Party is Israel. It doesn't seem like it right now because we're so invested in the Kamala momentum. We are so incredibly invested in how well Kamala is doing and how much everyone is excited about her and how she's not a carcass. But that's right there, dude. It's right there. Those are the two. I mean, when we say we, you know what I mean. Shut up. I'm talking about like most people in our generation, like people that are paying attention now, they're seeing this change of pace. But while the Israel equation is still just sitting right there.
Jeff Zeleny leads us off this hour. He's joining us now. So, Jeff, for Harris and any campaign, really, the mission number one is create the momentum.
What do you think the odds are? Wouldn't that mean the Dems are an administration which historically favors the incumbent? What? No, not at all. No, 9/11 is very different. We were attacked on 9/11. It was a unique moment in American history. America has rarely ever, due to its position on the globe, America has rarely ever withstood direct attacks. Like, no, that's not the case at all. Most people don't actually get stoked on more. As a matter of fact, like I've shown you a bunch of times at this point, majority of Americans actually don't want Americans to be deployed to protect Israel. Okay?
And then keep the momentum. For the Harris campaign, what does that mean? What does that look like now?
The chatter is correct. Historically, being an incumbent during voters were inclined not to change commanders in chief mid-war. This wouldn't qualify as one of those situations. Yeah, but there's also, there is not like any sort of direct association in this circumstance. If anything, our direct association is subject to much criticism. Our association with Israel is not a popular one. It is a negative one right now. And then on top of that, turning our indirect association in the forms of like weapons transfers to a direct association in the form of 4,000 Marines, and also experiencing only the negative consequences of a proxy in the form of like oil shock, like ticket shock on the price of an oil barrel. That would be the absolute worst thing that can happen to the Democratic Party in terms of this election. Donald Trump keeps running on, I'm going to finish the job. Look at how much destruction Joe Biden has brought. I'm going to finish the job. I'm going to be the anti-war candidate. He lies about it, which is a lie, by the way. He's not an anti-war candidate at all. But he's just going to keep saying that over and over again. Holy shit.
Well, Kate, it simply is keeping the momentum alive that they've had for about 3 weeks or so. You saw that rollout last week of the vice presidential running mate. That is, a week that happens only once in a campaign. Now, of course, it's back to some of the basics, actually saying what she would do as president. So we are going to look for that later this week. But look, this momentum is something that clearly, as you said, has gotten under the former president's skin. I was at that Detroit rally where he was talking about there was no crowd. There was a crowd, a very large crowd. Thousands of people were streaming out and streaming in. But look, what the Harris campaign is trying to do is not respond to every one of these sort of outrageous claims from their rival and keep their base energized and excited. The vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, he's out fundraising all week long. Vice President Harris is back here in Washington after her swing last week. They simply are trying to keep their base energized, of course, leading into the Democratic convention next week. But it is about policies and proposals that we are expect to hear later this week, because she really has not answered questions at all or say why, in fact, she is running for president.
Dow Jones about to hit an all-time high 40K, is not taking a nosedive. Brother, I said, not right now. Things are good right now, but they have the capacity to be very bad. They have the capacity to turn seemingly a problem in terms of the re-election chances of the Democrats. As in, if, like I said, Iran retaliates, okay, and then Israel goes nutty mode, and then American troops that are in the region now are called into combat to defend Israel, something that is broadly unpopular with the American electorate that will be even less popular once they actually do start putting themselves in harm's way in defense of Israel. The stock market will take a nosedive if oil refineries start getting torched. A lot of people don't understand that Saudi Arabia is in striking distance of Iran in terms of its oil refiners, in terms of like global oil production being completely disrupted. Everything's prices are tied to that.
What she wants to do as president in her first term of a Harris administration. So, of course, they have to put some more meat on those bones, Kate.
Well, let's talk about the meat on the bones. Republicans are attacking Harris. We heard that.
Why are people mad at Israel from being brutally attacked? No, that's a great question, Chatter. They clapped you because you're most likely a troll, and it's a question that I've asked, a question that I answered a million times over. Is Car Keys says, why are people mad at Israel for being brutally attacked on October 7? Israel has democratic elections, rights, and citizenship for everyone who is in it. Yet Hamas in Iran hangs gays and burns women alive who don't cover their hair. Israel's an update. It's illegal by international standards. As a matter of fact, the International Court of Justice has also declared Israel to be an update recently. You might not have heard about it because the media didn't really cover it, but it doesn't matter. The International Court of Justice recently found like a month ago at this point, found that Israel was actually in an illegal occupation in all the territories that it currently controls in the West Bank and also over Gaza. Having said that, however, Israel also is not the wonderful democratic nation that you presented as such. You might have been deluded into thinking that. They quite literally had protests. A major point of contention in Israeli society currently is whether or not Israeli prison guards have a right to Palestinians under detention to death. Israel, knowing full well that there is an ICC court case that has declared Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant to be criminals, okay, has decided to use the complementarity shield so that they don't get hit on that front as well, okay? What did they do? They prosecuted 9 prison guards that engaged in gang of Palestinian detainees in the Sdei Teiman facility. This caused an emergency Knesset meeting, an emergency parliament meeting in Israel, to be conducted where someone from Benjamin Netanyahu's own party, Likud, came out and openly stated, this is a matter of public record, that yes, of course, okay, this is a real thing that happened. Then immediate mass protest. They had a January 6th style situation where the most rabid elements in Israeli society, the most far right in Israeli society, stormed both the Sdei Teiman facility and stormed the military detention, in the courts where these 9 Israeli prison guards were actually being held. They actually released one of the major rapists. That major rapist, one of the most famous rapists that was released, went on Israeli television with a balaclava on his head and defended, trying to hide his identity, defended his right to Palestinians. Okay, all of this is just things that happened over the course of this past week. You might not have, once again, heard about it because seemingly the American media did not write about this at all, which is very odd because they kept writing about how there was mass sanctioned as a weapon of when there was no evidence for such a thing at all. And there was only evidence to suggest the exact opposite, but that's besides the point. All of a sudden, everybody shut the f up about being used as a weapon of war. And seemingly, Western media refused to cover these insane things that were happening. But it didn't end there, okay? It didn't end there. That rapist then turned around and unmasked himself as well and is flexing it, is flexing his right to be able to do such a thing. All the while, because if you ask the Biden administration, if you ask Blinken, if you ask John Kirby, it's actually Hamas that's ruining the ceasefire talks, and it's not Israel at all. Israel, on the other hand, refused to go along with the ceasefire proposal that I just mentioned to you, which was also pushed for by the United Nations at this point, 2735. Israel, then the principal negotiator on the Palestinian side on Iranian soil in Tehran, showing the world that they did not care about this ceasefire proposal at all. Okay? Those are all the things that happened over the course of the past couple of days. It's shocking when you say it. It's unbelievable that this is the reality we live in. So yeah, I hope you understand that maybe you were a little deluded into thinking that this was this like democratic country. Okay, you cannot democratically vote to do. You cannot democratically vote to uphold. And these are undemocratic concepts. These are human rights violations. Israel commits them on a daily basis, and we here in the United States give them unconditional loyalty, support, and weapons for them to engage in this kind of conduct. As a matter of fact, the Biden administration, after all of this was going on, turned around and released $3.5 billion for Israel. Okay, that was a couple days prior. The Biden administration then also sent or authorized 6,500 rounds of ammunition to be transferred to Israel. Israel, in a matter of hours after the revelation, turned around and used GBU-39 bombs, Boeing weapons, on a crowd of people that take 93 Palestinians in this strike. Okay, 93. They were praying in a mosque. It was near a school compound as well. They've injured hundreds more, and they 93. Okay? Does that strike you as a normal country that is genuinely worried about its own security? Or does it strike you as just because you might not have heard about it, just because the American population is completely oblivious to the horrifying nature of Israel's actions, does not change the reality that those actions are still taking place? Let's continue.
That from J.D. Vance, I heard it from surrogates who were on the show just this morning that Kamala Harris is not rolling out enough policy. What is the Harris campaign saying about that?
Well, look, it is very early in her candidacy, so we are starting to see more. In fact, we heard of some policy proposals late last week. She was talking about the border bill. She said if she is president, she would sign into law the border bill.
Oh, another thing the Biden administration also quietly did was stop the investigation into the crime unit in the West Bank. There was a unit that was like responsible for obvious crimes. Biden administration also supposedly sanctioned a couple settlers, 6 of them, and then refuted them later down the line, and also quietly stopped the investigation into the crime unit inside of the Israeli occupying force. So, you can fantasize about certain things, but it doesn't change the reality. It is not a tenable or defendable position at all. Venom Card Collector says Hamas would do the same thing to Israel if they had the upper hand. Yeah, that's a wonderful fantasy that dominant forces always have. Also thought that this would happen to them if they were to free the slaves. Do you feel like those were the good guys throughout history? Oh, if Hamas had the same weapons, they would do the same thing. That is not a good... The South African defenders and enjoyers also said the same thing as well. So did it's not a real argument. It's at most, it's like a really way to defend your barbaric actions. You said last year Trump would win if he started tweeting again. I know the situation changed drastically since then, but where are you on it now? No. Yeah, I said that when he was going up against Biden. I said that also at a time when like Trump was having a hard time penetrating into a mainstream. Is a very different equation.
That was going through Congress.
It's also the reason why I always tell you, like, when I'm giving you predictions about what will happen in an election, I always tell you, you cannot predict these things, okay? Like, it doesn't, like, there are so many insane things that occur in every election cycle at this point. Like, you're delusional if you think you can just, like, make an accurate lock that far out. Think about the last month.
Congress, promoted by a Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, and a bipartisan group that was derailed in Congress by the former president. He told.
But like, what is it? What is this? Whataboutism? Yes, Israel's developed into a state that does unspeakable things so awful that most moderates leave the country. No, they don't. It doesn't change the fact that Hamas is awful, or a lot of the Islamist organizations in surrounding countries have wanted Jews dead for decades, if not far longer. Yeah, that's copium. Like that's all this is. You are the one who is doing whataboutism while talking about whataboutism. I don't think you recognize that. Like, yeah, no, it's all Jew hatred, dude. You're right. It's definitely that. Like, you talk about anti-Semitism as though we're talking about like some neo in the United States of America, like drawing a swastika on the side of a synagogue. There is no, like, the understanding of anti-Semitism in the region is phenomenally different, okay? You are operating on Western understandings in this situation. No, Israel is a colonial vestige smack dab in the middle of this region, and it is uniquely brutal to every country in the region. What do you mean? Of course people are going to be like, yeah, I those guys. And some of those people are going to say, I those guys, and they're Jewish. You want to know why they say that? Because Okay? It's not the case, but how the fuck are you going to explain that to a dude in like Yemen, for example? How are you going to explain that to a dude in Palestine? And by the way, all things considered, they still aren't anti-Semitic, which is shocking to me. Like Palestinians, for the most part, are not even like primed on anti-Semitism in the way that like American are. It is actually a shocking phenomena. The scholar, what was his name? The professor that was by Israel, who was very active on Twitter, Refat, once famously said, yeah, I was incredibly anti-Semitic, and my opinions changed dramatically when I actually went to the West and I saw that like Judaism was not just bombs blowing up my houses. Okay. He met a Jewish person for the first time, or he saw Jewish people for the first time that were like anti-Zionist. It's like a shocking revelation for people when Israel keeps saying that they're doing this for Judaism. What the fuck are people supposed to think when they're literally the ones experiencing the violence? Regardless, at the end of the day, your personal convictions do not justify death and destruction anyway. That's why I advocate to give everyone health care in this country, including, okay, it's not like I'm a fan of them. I despise them. But I don't know how the fuck I got rated by Majority Report like 8 hours after their broadcast ended. It's also funny because like people always like, what is this ESVN stream? Oh, okay. Anyway, people always talk about this like it's such a funny, very obviously Western focused way to try to do propaganda whenever like Isaac Herzog or any number of like Israeli politicians will be like, they have this Hamas baby has a book. It is a Hitler book. It's so funny whenever like a Israeli official, whenever they would like blow up a baby's crib, or would then turn around and be like, see, they have a copy of Mein Kampf. Look, they have it annotated. This Palestinian. And it's like, it's so obviously like Western focused, because like for a Palestinian person in Gaza, in English too, for a Palestinian person in Gaza to develop like anti-Semitic tendencies, they don't need to read like a German dude. Okay. It's ridiculous. It's kind of like how if your only exposure to Islam are a bunch of terms, of course you're going to say Islamophobic shit's not okay, but there is explainable. Just like how anti-Semitism from people who only know Judaism of bombs blowing up is explainable, but not okay. Yeah, except your exposure to Islam or a bunch of blowing up is also silly, because the reality in the United States of America is not that it's Muslims that are responsible for the overwhelming majority of acts of domestic terror since 9/11 in this country. It's actually white supremacists. It's just that the media keeps claiming that it's Muslims. You know what I mean? Okay.
Told Republicans to stop negotiating on this. So she said she would sign that into law. So that's one very serious piece of policy. There's not been a bipartisan immigration bill discussed for a couple decades here successfully in Washington. So that is one. She also was following the former president's lead when she was in Nevada over the weekend, talking about the taxes for tips on workers, for servers and things. So that is something else that he accused her of following his lead. And she was, but she also said she would use that to pass a minimum wage bill as well. So we're seeing some of these lines being drawn in, but they are promising a more economic policy later this week, perhaps Wednesday or Thursday, to fill in some of these gaps. But again, she is trying to keep this momentum alive going into the convention next week. And then we're almost at the end of August. So yes, still 85 days to go. There's no doubt this is going to be